Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast. I'm Katie.
And I'm Elena.
And you'll notice that our intro is a little bit different once again, and that it's Thursday, but we've got both myself and Elena on the podcast. And that's because we're actually going to switch things up a little bit. I think we realized that it's a lot on us and maybe on our listeners to be releasing 2 podcasts every single week. It's a lot on our editing skills and it's a lot just overall. So we're going to move into releasing once a week. But, we still want to keep moving these female athlete topics forward. So I think you'll find that in the Thursday sessions that are with Elena and me, we're going to do some broader topics and some deep dive topics on female athletes. And then we'll have the podcast with Jim on the other Thursday. We'll kind of see how that evolves over time. But yeah, really excited for this new schedule.
Definitely really excited to continue having these conversations. And I think it's a good way, too, to make sure that these conversations are included holistically and not just a separate segment of the series. So yeah, we're just trying to keep the female athlete conversations moving forward.
Great. Okay, so today we have a really special guest interview. Before we go there, I think we're going to start, as we usually do, with some coaching and training insights. So Elena and I are going to go over a couple things that we've picked up from coaching and training this week. And I think the first one that I want to talk about is the power of sleep. So I have been traveling a lot, as many of you know, just because I have this sort of bi-coastal lifestyle going on. I've had a really busy couple months. And I would say that my sleep and recovery have probably not been super strong. And as a result, I have not felt amazing for my workouts recently. And the last week, I have made it my biggest priority to just really, really try and get some good sleep. So I've been shutting off screen time before I go to bed. I've been, reading. I've just been doing all these sort of calming activities. Sometimes I'll take some melatonin and my sleep has gotten a lot better. And I found that my workouts have been feeling so much better too. So all this is to say, if you're in a rut, go back to sleep. We've talked about using data to be helpful. I think sleep data is really useful, but the biggest thing is just you want that really good quality and hopefully quantity sleep. And that will really, really pay it forward for having strong workouts.
I'm so glad you're sleeping more. That makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah, it's a big shift, and I'm really trying to keep it going for hopefully several months so I can really hit my training hard again. Elena, tell us about your most recent insight.
I think my main insight for this week is just emphasizing knowing your iron levels and having that be checked, particularly for women, but I think for everyone. I think women are more likely to be low iron for various reasons, but I've struggled with this a lot in the past, and I think about a year ago is when I actually went and kind of took it into my own hands because it was really hard for me to get tested through the healthcare system without it costing a ton of money. And then I found Quest Diagnostics where it's just really easy. I think I pay $60 out of pocket to go to a clinic and then get quickly tested. It takes 5 minutes in and out. And then the results are in 24 hours, which is super nice. And I've been doing that now every 3 months to keep an eye on it. And I've been able to finally pick up patterns in terms of what supplements are helping me versus not really having an effect. So I would just say if you're experiencing any unknown fatigue, or for me, it would show up in a deep heaviness in my legs and just being really tired. I also was feeling more anxious and just down when I was really low iron. It can just show up in many different ways. So now that I understand it and get myself tested, I'm feeling much better about it. And then a few supplements that I think have been really helpful for me is I've been using the Thorn Iron by Glycinate. It just doesn't hurt my stomach as much. So I've been using that. And then I alternate that with some heme iron supplements as well. And then quick tips on that too is that it's better to ingest iron with vitamin C because it helps with absorption, and to not ingest it with vitamin D. So I make sure I take those at separate times of day. Yeah, and that's my tip of the week. It's been really helpful for me to actually understand my iron levels.
I love that. Yeah, super important for all athletes. And if you're worried about it, definitely go get that checked. So really appreciate the tips on how to best do that. Okay, so with that, I think we are ready to move into our interview for the day. And Elena and I actually made a long list of people that we wanted to interview on this podcast. But Gina, my athlete, Gina de Cognets, is probably at the top of that list. So I met Gina a couple years ago. I think she found us, again, shout out to the SEOs for finding the Endurance Drive. But Gina is actually based up in Norwich, Vermont, which is very close to where the Endurance Drive is based. And she found me and we really hit it off. And since then, I think I've coached Gina through several seasons. We've done some trail running, we've done some triathlon, and her improvement, but also just her energy that she brings to everything in life, especially training, has been really, really remarkable. And she has such a cool story with career, with balance, with life. She's just been such a huge role in my life and in many other people's. So Gina, welcome to the podcast. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's such a privilege to get to spend time with both of you and talk about sport and women athletes and everything. So thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Well, I think actually we often like to start these podcasts with just asking you to tell us your story. We're kind of modeled after stories in general, and we think there's a lot of power in sharing stories. Can you tell us, your life story, career story, athletic story? We just want to know where you come from and what got you here today.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so today I am the Senior Director of Organizational Development at Strava. And a lot of people say, what does organizational development mean? And what I like to say is once we've hired the people into Strava, what I do is help to coach, develop, and enhance their experience at Strava. And I partner with our business leaders to help them make sure their teams are working at their very best to help Strava be its best. A couple of years ago, I did an exercise called Find Your Why. Simon Sinek talks a lot about finding your why. And mine is that I help people and organizations realize their greatest potential. And so I'm really living my dream job right now, working at Strava, where it's at the intersection of community, fitness, and helping me draw on my strengths. But before I was at Strava, I was Director of Leadership and Development at Boston Beer. I did that for about a year and a half. That was a really neat job where I got to work in an industry and with an organization I'd never worked with before. Prior to that, I spent 13 years, really formative ones, working at Tuck, the business school at Dartmouth. I did a little bit of everything when I was there. So when I left, I was overseeing operations. I was the dean's chief of staff, which was probably my favorite job while I was there. I've also been director of marketing. I did alumni relations and fundraising. I think there's like a red thread in all of those, which is just, I really love the sense of community and connection that comes in those roles. Other career stuff, I worked at AOL Time Warner, which for anyone who is, under 35 is probably like, what, really? But it was really cool when I worked there. It was one of the new hot internet companies. I also worked in corporate communications. The red thread for me through my whole experience is I love learning. I love being in part of entrepreneurial organizations, whether it's a small place where I'm building a new role or helping build a company. I'd love to link maybe a little bit to my story as an athlete. I think I really became an athlete in high school when I was on the swim team. And I think the intersection of my leadership capacity and also my experience as an athlete started when I was the captain of the swim team. I was a B+ athlete on the swim team. I was not the best swimmer by any means, but I was selected by my teammates to be the captain. And that really meant a lot to me. And I think being on a swim team where everybody is valued. My coach, Rich Rollins, was such a formative person in my life. He believed in all of us. He would have us do this thing called the 800 fly, where every single person on the team swam 32 laps nonstop of butterfly. And if anybody stopped or cheated, we would have to start over. And his teaching us that you could survive the 800 fly helped you see I can do anything if I put my mind to it. And so being captain of the swim team was a huge experience. In college, I got turned on to running. And then, jumping ahead now, Katie, to your and my work with you, I find that being an athlete is the place where I get to be truly free. And it's the thing I do for myself. It's where I find so much joy and so much courage and so much motivation just to be like the very best version of myself in a place where, the very best for me is not the best in the world. It's just what's important to me. And it makes me feel really strong and really good.
That's so amazing. And there's really about 100 threads that I want to pull out of what you just said. But maybe the first one that I'd pull out is we've talked a lot on this podcast about the importance of having really good mentors and role models. And it sounds like you really had that experience in high school with a coach. Do you think that sort of informed your style of leadership and how you've brought that to your career? Or how would you say that really strong leadership bent developed for you?
Oh, I love that question. So I did an exercise with a coach once about who are people you admire and what are the qualities that you admire in them. And Rich is on that list. And one of the things I admired so much about him was he helped everybody feel important and help everybody feel valued and to see their own strengths. And that quality is something I try to bring to life in my work every day, because all of us have strengths and capacities to be excellent and amazing in what we do. And it's sometimes we need help finding those things. I think, Katie, as a coach, you've helped me find that as an athlete and to connect to my inner badass, which my run this week, I felt so strong and powerful. But sometimes we all struggle to find it, or despite working really hard. And so I think trying to bring that spirit to my work is something that's really important to me. And also just other professors and leaders valuing excellence. I also really value when people bring their very best to what they're doing and that they don't leave it on the floor. I think my parents instilled a really strong value in me that you need to show up and be your best. Now, sometimes on some days, your very best might be 60% of your potential. But if you give that 60%, you are at your best that day. That's really important to me as well.
Wow, I love that. There's just so many things in there that I think really resonated with me. And I love how you pull this thread of leadership throughout your entire career arc. And I'm really curious because I think oftentimes when we look at people like yourself that are really crushing it, doing what they're doing now, living their dream job, it can feel like there was a linear path there and it like made a lot of sense. And I'm really curious to hear more from you about maybe some of the struggles along the way and how you found that truth for yourself and kind of kept pushing through to find where you are now.
Oh, I love this question. And my path is anything but linear. So funny story is when I was interviewing at Boston Beer, one of the people I interviewed with, he's no longer there. We got on the Zoom and he looked at me and he started laughing and he said, "My gosh, I cannot wait to talk to you because your career path is even more zigzaggy than mine." And I loved, first of all, that he acknowledged that and also that he saw it as something that would be fun and interesting to talk about. But yes, by no means has it been this smooth linear path. I've gone 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, definitely a few times. I had what I call a midlife moment in 2019. I was just starting my doctoral program. I got my doctorate in leadership and learning in organizations. I was still working at Tuck. I had been there for almost 13 years and had thought for a long time, oh, I'm going to be in higher ed for the rest of my life. But I was having these increasingly just strong feelings of I'm not doing or being in the place that I'm supposed to be. And it was pretty earth-shattering, I would say. I am really responsible in my family for helping to support our family. I have an amazing husband who enables me in my career. I have 2 daughters, but we really rely on my job. And I was not thriving. And it made me realize I needed to make a change. But I was a little bit terrified because it was kind of like I'd gotten to the top of this ladder. I was really, I had this amazing dean's job at Tuck, this incredible business school, but I wasn't thriving. And I decided to jump off the ladder completely and made a decision that I needed to leave to figure out where I was going. And in taking that step back, I had to think like, what is important to me and where do I want to go? I wound up connecting with 2 women I had taken a class with on coaching. They were starting a new business called Connection 101. It's now called Connection Labs. We came together and started that company. It was an amazing experience for me. I loved working with them. It's still a great company and it's going, but I also kind of a year into that realized, wow, I miss being part of something bigger. I think having the confidence to trust your gut and trust that feeling that you get when you are hearing, you get signs in your heart, you get them in your head, you get them even in your body. So I had even little physical things happening and it tells you you're not in your right place. Trusting yourself to know that you need to start exploring is something that I feel like I've gotten better at over the years. And also there's that phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. And I think when you have been an excellent athlete or an excellent student or excellent in anything you do, you get in this whole mindset of comparing yourself to others and reminding yourself that really the journey you're on is the one that's your own. And finding where are you and where do you need to be and not worrying so much about the outside, which is really easy to say and a lot harder to do, especially when you're struggling. But yeah, I have like a midlife moment probably every 5 years. So,
well, I want to validate that because I think a lot of people maybe think about those midlife moments or have them or have feelings, but don't necessarily connect them to action. And you're someone who I really admire and saying like, no, I think I'm not happy or I'm not thriving here. And then actually taking the step to do something different. I think it's a very small subset of the population that even does that because there is a lot of inertia and momentum that keeps you on the same track, kind of working each rung of the ladder. So I hope that this encourages some of our listeners to just think like, am I thriving where I am? It sounds like it's really never too late to have that moment. And the ability to just keep reinventing yourself is something that can exist kind of throughout your life.
Yeah, I love that too. It's like the value of authenticity and how you live your life. And I think it's like an existential journey, regardless. Like that is the journey of life, is like figuring out in each phase of your life where you're best suited to be. And I also really admire people that do that. So thanks for sharing that, Gina, because I think that is very, very valid and something that I would hope to live up to.
Oh, sure.
So another thing I wanted to plot of this, you mentioned you're a mom, you have 2 daughters, you're a career woman, you're an incredible athlete. Gina's always crushing it on the trails and in triathlon. Can you talk to us a little bit about balance? Because we have sort of entertained this topic. We don't have kids ourselves. We, I think, both aspire to have kids. Careers, kind of, we want to have it all. And we'd love to hear how you just think about that. Is balance even something we can achieve?
I think balance is bullshit, to be. I think it sets an impossible standard. And what has helped me feel more like what I want is possible is to make the acknowledgement or recognition that you choose what you prioritize at any one time. And if you try to prioritize everything all at once, you kind of wind up at that like mediocre feeling or the feeling of feeling stretched. And so you make active choices on what not to do as much as you make choices on what to do. So in my situation, I'm really enabled to have the career I have because I have a husband who has been such an incredible support. He makes it possible. Archer is the CEO of my house. So he helps make sure that everything goes on in our home. And I have a lot of privilege to have that type of support. And he helps with our kids and the dogs, and he helps feed us and all of those things. You know, I don't see my friends as much as I would like to. But my big priorities, if I had a balance right now, my work is a huge priority for me. It gives me a lot of joy. It gives me a lot of satisfaction and pride. My family is definitely obviously another big piece. And then my running and my athleticism gives me a sense of personal joy. I don't get to do some of the things I really like to do. Like I also like to be creative and paint, and I'm not very good at it, but I think it's fun. And I like to learn to knit and like to take classes. And you just have to decide, what are you going to prioritize? And my friend Pam gave me really good advice too when my first or second daughter was one, where I was feeling a little bit like, wow, this is so hard being a mom. It's hard working. And I felt like I didn't have time for a lot of the other things. And she said, where you are today is not where you are going to be for the rest of your life. It's not where you're going to be 5 years from now, 1 year from now, even 1 month from now. And staying really present in where you are in the day and just acknowledging where you are and then trying to be like accepting of where you are helps you get past that feeling of always trying to go faster and further, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And I think I'm a little bit more curious to hear more tactically how you think about structuring that balance for yourself. Like, I think Katie and I talked about that a lot too, where we definitely recognize the ebbs and flows in our lives. And I know Katie's been working on her dissertation right now. So that's like a big thing that's been coming up in her life. How then do you have like a process, I guess, that is helpful for like, I'm going to actually like have this conversation with Archer about what I'm prioritizing now versus another time, or like, what does that look like for you more tactically through the years?
Yeah, I love this question. So I am really structured with my time, and I love my calendar. I use my calendar. Actually, my whole family has calendars. And so just very, very tactically, it's, I have blocks on my calendar for when I work out and when I'm going to shower. Shout out to Kelly Nolan. She is a young Dartmouth alum who has a whole business. I took her class, helped me work on this. But really, like this, what it does is it helps me know when I have time and what I don't have time for. So that's one just very tactical, strategic piece, the time blocking that has helped a ton. Archer and I do talk and check in. I think we've made a decision as a family that this model works really well for us today. I hope to be able to give back to him at some point, the opportunity for him to flex in more into the things that he likes to do. Archer's a maker. He's not a knowledge worker. So he has a different flow as well in terms of how his work is. He's renovating our bathroom right now. And so that's how, he's contributing in a big way to our house. So that's one piece. And I think I love reflection. So I really preach the benefit of self-reflection. Katie and I have talked about this, and if you'd like, I can talk a little bit more. I do some coaching on the side around something called Designing Your Life. And it's based on design thinking principles. And one of the first things of the whole Designing Your Life approach is figuring out, start where you are and understanding where you are. And sometimes when I feel like I'm out of balance, I have to just take a piece of paper out and really map out, okay, wait, what's working well and what doesn't feel in balance? And then having that conversation almost internally first, and maybe with a friend to say, hey, this feels like it's not working, and finding little experiments that you can make to make changes has really helped me as well.
Well, I think on that vein, actually, I would love to talk a little bit about Design Your Life coaching. So for a little bit of context, I think we just talked about this over a conversation at one point, and it really got my wheels turning to be like, oh, interesting. I might want to do this with my own life. So we've actually had a pretty fun trade in the last couple of months between endurance coaching and broader life coaching. I would say the latter is maybe more important. So I'm very grateful that you've been doing that for me. But could you just tell us a little bit more about what this is, what made you want to pursue it, kind of where you see it going next, and what the general parameters are?
Sure. And this goes back to that midlife moment I had in 2019. And people will be able to see that I'm pointing at a big sticky that says Design Your Life. And it's at the top of my giant calendar that I use on the wall to plan. I was working a project with IDEO when I was working at Tuck, and I was having this, midlife moment of sorts. And a woman I worked with, Deirdre, said, you have to read this book. And she wrote Design Your Life on the sticky, and I've kept it as a memento of my courage in that moment. And the book really talks about how, we can use this design thinking idea where design thinking at work would be listening to what your users are looking for and understanding the pain points and then trying to build for what they want versus what you think they want. So how do you apply design thinking for yourself where you're getting curious about what do I need and want? What's important to me? And then using what you learn to talk to people about it, to explore ideas, to try things, and then to how you tell your story. And the cornerstone, the biggest activity that has helped me is this thing called Odysseys within Designing Your Life. And when you do the Odysseys, you map out 3 different versions of what your life could look like over the next 5 years. So the first one is if you were in, the situation you are today, nothing else were to change. What would your ideal 5 years look like? And that would be, what does your career look like? What does your family look like? What is your travel, your workouts, anything? And you map it out on a piece of paper. The second one, and it's typically done around work, would be if what you're doing today went away, what would you do? And so mapping out that second profile for the next 5 years. And what does that look like for family and other things? The third one is the one where I think the magic really happens. And it's where you say, if I didn't care what anybody thought, and I didn't have to worry about how much money I made, what would I do for the next 5 years? And by taking those guardrails off or, kind of giving yourself a magic wand to imagine what might seem impossible, you unlock what is really driving your passion and your joy and where you want to be. And taking that thread and applying it to your real life has some real power in it. So for me, 5 years ago, my third Odyssey looked a lot like Wonder Woman Island, for lack of a better word. So it was a leadership camp for women in Hawaii where I would help them connect with things like running and surfing, but also having access to a lot of leadership development and cool speakers. And I think that thread is what I do in a lot of ways at Strava, except I also do it with women, but I do it with these really athletic and caring people and getting to help them connect with a lot of what they do and help them be better leaders. And so it sounds really corny, but it's really powerful.
That sounds amazing. I really want to do that too. I think actually, just speaking candidly, I feel like one thing that might hold me up there is that if truly no one cared and you didn't have to worry about the logistics like money and family, those are some real things that I have been considering a lot more at this stage in my life than I did previously. So I'm a little bit more curious to hear then how did you take that really amazing idea and actually put tangible steps towards it that did work within the restraints that you had logistically around family and money, et cetera?
Yeah, great question, Elena. I think what I did was it was understanding how this intersection of leadership, athletics, and passion was where I wanted to focus my energies. And so when I was making a switch from Tuck, where I was helping lead a higher ed organization, I had aspects of it, the leadership piece was really strong there. It was realizing I was missing this other component. And so it was, how can I take and bottle up what I'm hearing is a big passion for me and make it come to life in a place where there are those boundaries. So maybe we could riff and do a live, little bit of mini coaching on it.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
So tell me, if you had no constraints, if money were no issue and you could do anything you want, what might that 5 years look like for you?
It's so amazing. I have to think more broadly, but I would say that I derive so much joy from being outside, training, pushing myself, exploring the world, and particularly doing that with others, building community around that. it's really reflected, I think, in what I've started doing here with Katie. And this is something that I've thought more about, but like trying to share lessons and growth through female athletics and growing that community and kind of passing that forward to the next generation, where I think it's like, if you could be what you needed when you were younger, like what would that look like? And trying to give the younger generation better role models and more information and just a better community to move forward. So I think it'd be really like kind of what you're saying around leadership, around connecting sport to broader life lessons and life goals, and building retreats around that and building events around that and coaching and kind of having this whole like personal brand around outdoor adventuring and community.
Okay, so I love that. And then you mentioned that you have some constraints that you're thinking about around, I think I've heard you say that you're married, have a husband, and I potentially probably in a zone where at some point in the next few years, maybe think about becoming a mom.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Okay, so those things are there. But you lit up, I watched you light up, I can see it, as you were talking about where these passions are. And it sounds like you're already doing maybe a mini experiment, or you're testing out the waters in the work you're doing with an endurance and drive. And so maybe what I would say to you is, as you do this work where you're doing some training and doing some coaching, is what else might you experiment and build onto this where you are today, and just to see what you learn, talk to other people, think about like, are there companies or organizations where you see these things around the intersection of women and, come as you are coming to life, and where might you plug in? And I think the other thing I always have to remind myself, and I would remind anybody else too, is that sometimes we think we found the thing, and then we learn and we find out, oh, the thing isn't what I thought it was going to be. And that's such a bummer. And it's really hard. You almost grieve the idea of what you thought it was going to be, and letting yourself grieve it. But then also staying curious, keep telling your story, and see how people react. And the more you do that, and the more you tell your story will shape. And also, you both are like, have so much more life left in you. I'm 51. And I love being 51, by the way. I think the world makes women in her middle age feel like you're washed up or something, and that is so not the case. You're actually coming into your own, which is pretty exciting. But you have a lot of time to figure it out. You don't have to have all the answers right now. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as high-achieving women in particular to have all the answers, and we don't, and we never will, and nobody does.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing that perspective, and I think that is certainly something I think about too, because I do love how you framed it before, of the common thread that you can see throughout your journey. And I think I've thought about that when I treat my life as if my life was a startup, what would I define as the mission? And it's, I think, something similar to you actually, which is like helping people realize that they can achieve more, and, learning, always being curious, always being authentic, and recognize that can take many different paths, which I think I will have a very zigzaggy career, and learning to be okay with that is quite a challenge, but I think it's also been really cool. So it's great to see role models like you that are pushing that forward. So I will be patient, and I know it'll work out at some point.
And I think our listeners actually might be hearing the first planning meeting for Wonder Woman Island. It sounds like we're all pretty aligned on wanting to pursue those. So stay tuned.
Let's do it.
This is something that's actually come out of a few things that you were both saying, but I wonder if we could riff a little bit on just talking about kind of pursuing these big goals in sport and in life. I think there's actually a lot of interesting parallels between athletic coaching and life coaching. So maybe, Gina, I'll ask you that one first. Just what are the parallels that you see there?
Yeah. So just like you sometimes talk about how when you and Elena go for runs together, I think when you and I have gone on runs or walks, we talk about how in our athleticism, we get to push our growth edge and stretch what we think is possible. And I've heard you talk about this on the podcast, where that builds your confidence to know, hey, I've done this 50-mile race. I think you can take that power that you build as an athlete and channel it into pushing your growth edge as a leader or in your work and whatever that looks like. And so why do I get so much joy out of being, a slightly above average athlete? It's because it gives me this space that is safe to just try and to fail. I mean, there's certainly times where you go out there and you feel horrible and you think, wow, why am I doing this? But you realize that hard work and consistency pays off. And it's just a good reminder when I'm in my work situation or when I was getting my doctorate, which kicked my ass. It was oh, okay, this is going to pay off. And I was thinking a lot today on my walk about how nothing that we get in life, or very few things in life that we're truly proud of, came easily. We had to work really, really hard to get them. And it was the blood, sweat, and tears we put into it and the difficult moments that make that ending so much sweeter. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of how I think about how they go together.
Definitely. It's like in the skiing world for backcountry skiing, it's earn your turns. It just feels a lot better when you climb up the hill and then ski them, even if it's only 10 turns instead of just taking the lift up. Absolutely. I really love that. I'm curious to hear more then about how you specifically approach the organizational development at Strava and like taking some of these lessons you've learned from sport and you're at a company that's doing a lot of sport related things. Like what does that look like more tactically for your own work?
Sure. So I think one of the things that probably comes from my athleticism, but also just a real investment in what I learned a lot in Connection 101 was around how do you leverage your strengths? So I think, especially in US society, we spend a lot of time focusing on all the things we think we need to fix or do better instead of focusing on where are my strengths and where am I already excellent that I can get even more excellent. But I worked at Tuck. A really senior leader at Amazon came and spoke to us, and he talked about at the level of people he was managing, if he spent time picking away at the one or two things they didn't do well, he would not get as much of a return as if he spent time focusing on where they were really strong and helping them grow those areas more. So if I relate that to the athlete side of things, Katie noticed a year or two ago, she said something to me once, was like, wow, you really like running hills. You'd be really great at trail running. She set a little seed in my head, like, wow, Katie thinks I'd be good at trail running. Maybe I should start exploring trail running. And I happen to work with an amazing woman, Michelle Bousquet. She's my chief people officer and my leader, who's a trail runner. And she got me all excited. And then I wound up running Broken Arrow, which is this crazy sky race in Lake Tahoe last year. And so it's, it's like, well, okay, if I like running hills and they don't freak me out, I might as well go for it and do it. And I would say the same thing applies at work is where are you strong? Because when you use your strengths and when other people see you using your strengths, it helps elevate the performance of everybody around them instead of focusing on like, wow, Gina's not so great at doing accounting. Well, you don't want me on your accounting team. And that's fine, but you do want me on a team where I can help encourage people to be their best. So again, take it maybe one step further, Elena, what does that look like at organizational development? We work closely with, we spent last year focusing on manager development and helping our managers be better at leading their teams and coaching their teams. This year, we're working on how do we unlock the potential of the teams themselves. So not just the managers, but the managers with their people. And supporting them. How can they grow? Where can they push their growth edge in their work and just get better? And I think learning is incredible fuel for just results and being your best.
Yeah, that's awesome, Gina. And I think it makes a lot of sense to focus on strengths. It's something that I want to be even more attuned as a coach to do and pull that out of my athletes and the people in my life in general for friends and family, et cetera. So it sounds like they're very lucky to have you. I guess a transition that I was thinking about when you had mentioned this before and it really caught my attention was when you mentioned being a 51-year-old and loving being 51. And I think we've gotten some listener feedback that people would love to hear a little bit more about what the trajectory of a female athlete looks like through different decades and kind of hear more about how you felt as an athlete at different stages of your life to bring to this point where you're just so happy and feeling fulfilled at your age.
Sure. So I think probably one thing I maybe have going for me is that when I was an athlete, when I was in my 20s and my 30s, I was not at the top of my game necessarily, right? So I come into my 40s and then my 50s now of someone who still feels like I have room to grow and improve. And I'm an Enneagram 7. I don't know how much you all know about Enneagram, but Enneagram people are enthusiastic visionaries. And we also have this gift for reframing kind of anything and making it positive. And so, I read a lot about being in middle life, and Chip Conley is a really cool person. He talks about the idea of modern elders and just how midlife is this next chapter. And I think it's a lot about your mindset and how you come into midlife. And do you feel like, oh, I'm so old because I'm 50 and my life is over? And I would challenge you to say, especially for women who were, my daughters are teenagers. In 4 years from now, they'll both be in college. In some ways, your life starts to open up again, where you have had a lot of responsibilities for others. And now you have this new chapter where you have more time for yourself and more time for your partner if they're around. And so it's also, I think, working with Katie has been really great, and having a coach at this time in my life to help me realize that more is actually possible. I think you can get stuck in a rut where you just keep doing the same things. You run the same 5-mile loop and you don't challenge yourself with hill repeats and speed workouts or strength training. And it is hard. I do think media, especially for women, media, society, like structures make us feel that our worth is less than when we no longer are capable of bearing children and when our faces don't look perfect. And I just think it's bullshit. You do what you have to do. If Botox and things help you feel good, that's great, but I think the world's telling me that my face isn't good enough because it has wrinkles, or my body isn't good enough because it's a little bit slower, or it holds a little more here. I get beat up by it. Katie knows I have weeks where I feel really beat up about how I look and feel in my body. I try to remember that my body has given birth to 2 kids. It's run up tons of hills and mountains. It is, knock on wood, a place that, gives me the gift of health and vitality. And I focus on that. And I think, again, it's that staying present with where you are and embracing where you are instead of fighting where you are. I hear a lot of women, you look back at photos of yourself when you were younger and you think, how beautiful was she? And you remember, I'm almost tearing up thinking about it. And you think about how you sometimes felt about yourself in that moment. And you realize, why did I not see the beauty that she had when I was there that I see now? And so that's the gift I wish I could give to so many younger women and to my daughters, is I look at them and they're just so extraordinarily beautiful. And I see how even for them, sometimes this social media and influences make them think they need X, Y, and Z. And just, you're so beautiful where you are, and remembering that.
That's such a powerful message, Gina. I think I've always taken that from you. I coach you in sport, but I've taken those lessons from you so much. So it's really valuable to hear them through the life stages. It reminds me actually of a quote that you gave us when we originally did our female athlete forum, where you talked about, it can be challenging to overcome these hardwired gendered expectations of how we should look or be as women. And you said something about how you think this is changing a little bit with younger women. Do you feel like it's different now than it used to be in the past? And how have you experienced that kind of over the course of your life?
Sure. So I do see it changing. I see something I really admire about the kids in my daughters. I guess they're Gen Z or even Gen Alpha. I don't even know which generation it is, but they embrace where they are. I think they have more body confidence. They wear what they want to wear, whether they are a size 0 or a size 14 or more. I think that shows that they're saying to the world that's trying to make them look and be a certain way, hey, I'm going to be myself and I'm going to love myself for who I am. I think also women's athletics and sports. I spent the weekend in Boston with my daughter at a club volleyball tournament, and just watching all these young women of all different sizes and everything just be these strong, capable athletes, and see them gaining their confidence and being on part of teams. It gives you the chills. It's just so powerful. And Christine Yu, I know you talked about her book. She talks a lot about how we see women, young women, leaving team sports and other things because they don't always feel that they can be successful. I think that's an area, maybe Elena, that's an area where you could have more impact, especially given your hockey experience. But I think, how do we help girls stay on teams and stay connected to sport? Because it is such a powerful way to boost your confidence. I think, Katie, you and I've talked about this one too, I think. But, when I was younger and I was a swimmer, people always used to say, oh, wow, you really have swimmer shoulders. You have broad shoulders. And that was hard to hear, because in the way women were appreciated at that time, having strong shoulders and, broader figure was not necessarily such a good thing. And I think my shoulders are the favorite part of my body now. I love how strong they are. I love that they have shape and that they help me be strong and capable. And so it's the invitation to ourselves to reframe how people want to see us to how we want to see ourselves. And it's hard sometimes, but
I love that. Yeah. And I think it just made me think a little bit about what I can tell that's common through how you have answered these questions, is that you have a really amazing ability to learn and reframe and kind of rewrite your narrative. And I'm curious to hear how you would describe in your own words, maybe like the either innate skills that you have that help you to do that, or the learned skills that you have and how you developed those.
Sure. I do think some of it is probably just how I'm wired. My dad was really similar, so I think it must have gotten passed down in the genes, but I think it is an absolutely learnable skill. And so I think we sometimes tell ourselves, we hear this voice in our head, right? And we think that that voice, because we hear it in our own head, is our own voice. And it is one voice inside of our head, but I call it the inner critic. Sharon Salzberg, who's a great meditation teacher, talks about naming the inner critic to help you befriend it. So mine's named Ursula, after the mean octopus in the Disney movie. Yeah. But I talk to her sometimes, and when I hear Ursula raging out and saying like, oh, you didn't work hard enough at that, or oh, look, your body doesn't look the way you want it to look, I talk to her and I say, hey, Ursula, I hear you. Thanks for trying to look out for me, but no, thank you. Like, I've got this, and you can go back underwater right now. I'm going to go forward. And I think another way to help yourself reframe is challenging the fact that you hear in your head. So when the fact in your head is, oh, I'm not good enough. Okay, well, what proof do you have that you're not good enough? Because here's some other facts I see. Like, well, you went out and, Elena, you ran in a snowstorm the other day. You overcame the yak tracks issue. Like there's like the ways that you've shown that you're not only enough, you're more than enough, and having that objective lens to reframe. And another trick I've learned is think about how you would talk to yourself if you were your friend. So if Katie comes to me and she's struggling with something, and I can talk to her and be encouraging and say, oh, that's okay. But if I just listen to myself and that mean Ursula voice who's telling me how shitty I am, it's like, well, I can be the good witch or the good friend voice and talk to myself in that way and reframe it from her perspective instead of that nasty critic.
I think that's so valuable. And I think we've talked about it a lot in the context of just comparison. It's really easy to compare yourself to others. It's really easy to compare to yourself, a previous version of yourself. And it sounds like you've kind of come up with these tools that are really, really good for fighting that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. We've actually talked about it in the context of Strava a little bit, how a lot of people can use Strava for more of this comparison to others or comparison to themselves. And sometimes that's even hard for me when I'm like, oh, look where I was a year ago, something like that. But I love your Strava content. And this is a quick plug that you should follow Gina on Strava because she does some really cool stuff. But could you tell us a little bit about that, both as a Strava user and someone who's really, really deeply involved in the organization?
Sure. When I think of Strava, to me, it's another place to tell stories and to be my authentic self. And my authentic self is my run the other day that I feel really proud of. My pace was 10 minutes and 32 seconds or something like that. And I don't feel shame for that. I admire people who run faster than I do. And I certainly aspire to someday get faster. But I also, it's just a number, right? It's just like the number on the scale is not the sense of your worth. It's just a like measure of your body. And so Strava is a great place to tell stories. It's to use the photos to engage your audience and share how it's going. And I think sometimes when I am the most authentic or talk about how I'm feeling, whether really positively or having a hard day, that's when I get a lot of support from my community. Michael Horvath and Mark Gainey started Strava with the idea that what we can accomplish together is greater than what we could accomplish on our own. It came from their experience being rowing buddies in Harvard. And so that's what I think about Strava when I go on Strava is how do I draw from this community of extraordinary people who are athletes and help them encourage me to be my best. And I also don't think anyone's really looking at our pace or our analysis. A lot of people click into the view analysis and see if, Gina spent 95% in zone 2 or zone 5. People are focused on themselves. And so freeing yourself from worrying about what everybody else thinks.
I love that. I think that's so important. And that's something that I think we all can be working towards and aspiring to. And yeah, like at the end of the day, I think we love Strava. And it's only when that inner critic comes in that it can be more of a challenging tool to work with. But I love your perspective on it so much. So we've been going for a little while now. I think a final question that I'd love to ask you about is what you're excited for in 2024, because you have some really cool stuff on the horizon, both in the athletic domain and then sort of in the life/career domain. So just tell us what we can expect from Gina in 2024.
Well, I think the three of us are excited to prototype Wonder Woman Island. So that's something I'm pretty excited about to do on the side. It's something that's just a passion project and really looking forward to that with you two phenomenal and inspiring women. I am doing something I swore I would never do. I am running another marathon. I'm making it super public by saying it on this podcast, but assuming I get into the New York Marathon, I am going to run a fourth marathon, which I ran 3 when I was in my 20s. My goal with Katie's help is to meet or beat my fastest time from when I was younger, which was not super fast at all. It was like 4:25 or something, but I believe I can do it. I actually think I'm a stronger runner today than I was then. And I hope my body stays healthy and injury-free. So that's my goal. I think last thing I'm really excited for, my family and I are going to London this summer in August to see Taylor Swift. So
it is really exciting. Probably your biggest air race of the year, I would say, is Taylor Swift.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, Gina, thank you so much. I feel like this has been so beneficial for Elena and me, and I'm so excited that we get to share it with all of our listeners. I'm sure we're going to want to have you again on the podcast to kind of just grab some more pearls of wisdom because you have an infinite supply of those. But I think now's the time where I just want to say thank you for being a member of our community, for being a close friend, for being one of our athletes, and someone that I think we both aspire to be. Like when I grow up, I want to be Gina, which is really, really awesome.
I'm in the same boat. Yeah. Thank you so much, Gina. And for the live coaching session. Really, really appreciate it. Very inspired. And yeah, I would just treasure this conversation. And I hope that we can talk more soon. And we'll also, I think, Katie, we should grab some of Gina's best books and podcast recs and put them in the show notes so that people can also learn the wisdom from her. So yeah,
we will. And we'll also add some links for how people can contact you because I think a lot of people are going to want to work with you after this.
Oh, I love it. And it's such a treat to get to spend that last hour or so with both of you. We're really lucky to have you in the Endurance Drive community. And I learned so much from you. I'm really into this idea of like intergenerational friendship right now. And I love that, Katie, you and I have such a great connection as coaches and friends and just such a gift. And Elena, I feel like ours is coming. So great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina.